I think this summer I've really figured out like my quintessential favorite genre, which people are multifaceted. You certainly can like more than one genre. I certainly like more than just one genre, but I think I've figured out like my go-to reliable genre, if that makes sense, which is very exciting to me because I have only been into reading adult literature, reading adult novels for about a year now. Like many people, I kind of obsessively read as a kid, a preteen, and a teenager, and then just kind of fell off of it at a certain point. And last August, I got back into reading, so it's been exactly a year now. And so it's taken me a little bit to kind of figure out my taste in adult books. And this summer, I think it really all kind of came together. And so, incidentally, this summer wrap up has kind of become a descent into me reading weird fiction and figuring out that I actually really love weird fiction. That being said, this summer I read 8 books, and then I have three that I kind of currently am reading slash in the process of DNFing. I'm in a bit of a reading slump at the time that I'm recording this. Anyways, these are the books that I have physically with me. A lot of them are at the library because I had to turn them in because it took me too long to record this, that this is all I have. This book I read this summer is called Several People Are Typing by Calvin Kelsuke. And I read this book because Frankie's Shelf here on YouTube kind of mentioned it over and over again. And the repetition sold me on it. I was like, if this is worth mentioning a couple of times, then it's worth reading. Plus, it was a pretty short book. It's only like 200 pages, and it is entirely a chat log of a Slack message group. So it sounded really easy to read. If you don't know what Slack is, it's like Discord, but strictly for like work. Think Microsoft Teams or something like that. Just a chat log. It has all these different like channels or like categories, and you can also like privately DM people on there. And I have had a job where I had to use Microsoft Teams, so it was a funny read for that reason to me. In the book, the company that they work for is a PR marketing firm, so if a company has like a scandal, they work on like copy and like images that will kind of alleviate that scandal. And like I said, it's told exclusively through the chat log. So you're kind of introduced to all these characters at once, and it's a bit much to keep track of, but I think that the author did a really good job where you can pretty easily kind of fall into it and be able to differentiate who is who based on their voice and kind of what's going on. So you don't really have to super kind of keep track of that after like a couple dozen pages. Main character is Gerald, and he gets accidentally uploaded into Slack. Like he's working from home, and then he just ends up inside Slack itself. Like he's in the chat program, and he's typing to his coworkers like, "Hey guys, I can't come into work today. I'm stuck in here. Please help me." And they're going, "This is a funny bit that you're doing, Gerald. Like, you can just work from home. Like, you don't have to do all this." Like, they're not really taking him seriously. I think in general, this is a great pick for anyone if you're struggling with reading, if you're trying to get into reading for the first time. Because it's a chat log, it's like super easy to read. Like, if you're used to looking at your phone screen, I think that this is like a good intro into like adult reading a book. And it's a very funny read, like the concept. Like Gerald gets uploaded into this Slack thing and he's stuck in there. Like it's a very funny concept, but it's also more eerie than I thought it would be going into it. It's almost kind of the surrealist kind of horror thing. It doesn't go like full tilt in that direction, but I really liked those elements where things were just kind of off-putting or like creepy and you're just wondering like what is going on here. And it's also just good for anyone who's like nosy or like interested in like people, work drama, work tea, because you can read not only like all of the normal DMs that are in the Slack, but also in the book includes like DMs between specific people. You're finding out about affairs people are having in the office, the boss's personal to-do list. Like it just it's fun. My only complaint was I did want it to do just like a little bit more in the surrealist horror direction. There was a lot of like loose threads, and I'm not somebody who really needs everything tied neatly into a bow in a book. I am good with a certain level of ambiguity or kind of open-endedness to an ending. However, it just It was, like, almost there. I feel like it needed to push just, like, a little bit more than maybe it did. I wanted some of those threads to just go a little bit more somewhere before we got to the ending of the book. It felt like there was one storyline that got kind of resolved, and then the other, like, 4 were kinda just, like, left there. And like I said, I don't need them all to be resolved neatly or anything. I'm definitely not one of those people. But I think that if this book was, like, a little bit longer or had just, like, a little bit more, I think this could have been, like, a very solid 5 out of 5 stars for me. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars because I super enjoyed it, even though it did feel a little bit like I didn't get completely everything I wanted out of this. And it's, like, a super gimmicky book, right? Like, it's a chat log, not everyone's cup of tea. I thought that it was awesome. Like, it just I don't know. Anything that's like a super quick read too, I'm just automatically predisposed to look at more fondly. I like finished this on my lunch break at work. It was so quick. Like in an hour, I could get through half the novel. And it was a lot of fun. And yeah, if it was a little bit longer, I don't think I would have minded. And also, of course, this author hasn't like written anything else, which is always the like curse of my life. When I really love a book, I look into the author and it's like the only thing they've written for some reason. So, and I found this because of Frankie, and honestly, it kind of changed my view on like the kind of books that I'm into because this book obviously is presented the way that I just have, but there's a little bit more going on in here that I really enjoyed, and it kind of is making me look for more books sort of like that in the future. And whenever people ask me, like, what kind of books do you like over this last summer? I tell them about this book. I'll be like, well, one of my favorite books was this book where this guy got uploaded to Slack and he's stuck in there. I don't know. I think it's a fun book. It's a fun book to tell people about. And I think that, yeah, if you like to look at your phone screen, this is a good book to get you into reading. The next book I read is Exit Interview: The Life and Death of My Ambitious Career by Christy Coulter. And I have this physically because I went to my favorite bookstore. It's like a 3-story massive bookstore. I love to go in there. And this was on the recommendation shelf at that bookstore. And anytime I'm in that bookstore, I need to buy something. I'm addicted to buying books. I don't know. And I feel a little cursed because I feel like I only end up buying books that I don't like because, spoiler, I didn't really love this book. I normally always love memoirs. I've said that kind of over and over on this channel where I'm like, I always love a memoir. I think that people's lives are so interesting and I love the realness of like that personal voice. And this was kind of framed as like this expose of Amazon, kind of like I was assuming this anti-capitalist thing. It also kind of frames itself up to like explore gender dynamics and stuff like that. It seemed right up my alley, right? I picked it up. I read the first page, which I'm going to read to you because I feel like you need to understand my betrayal. First chapter, Implausibilities. I can tell people don't believe me when I say my coworkers kept bottles of booze on their desk, or that they sometimes popped beta blockers before meetings with Jeff Bezos, or that I found out about the Kindle and the drones and the Whole Foods on the internet like everyone else. It's hard to swallow that our laptops are sometimes repaired with duct tape, or that my psychiatrist credited Amazon employees for his second home in Hawaii, or that the mere existence of Amazon warehouses could slip my mind for years at a time, never mind what went on in them or what it might be like to work in one. Yeah, it sets itself up to be some kind of feminist expose of capitalist Amazon. Like I said, she gets hired in like 2006, 2008, pretty early on in the company, and she stays there for like years and years and years of her life. She climbs the ladder, she works all these different jobs, and it's kind of following her as she's doing all this. And it's she's still obviously kind of drinking the Kool-Aid even as she's writing this. Like an embarrassing amount of this book is her kind of defending Amazon and some of their practices and being like, well, people think this, but that's not actually how it is. And it's just like, I don't know. It's a little embarrassing, girl. Like, it couldn't be me. And a lot of the feminism in this book as well, it's kind of framed up like it's meant to be super introspective, and it comes across very feminism is when girl boss. Like, it's just feminism is when you can climb the corporate ladder, and that's all it really is. And obviously, I am certain that Christy Coulter experienced, massive amounts of sexism in her job, but the lack of like intersectionality or class analysis really made that fall flat in this book. Like, it just didn't work. Like, there's this quote that I have tabbed because it's crazy, where she basically just says, like, Amazon is men and men are Amazon. This is on page 164 in a chapter called Inferior Alien Brain. And there's kind of like a lead up to this part of the passage, but I'm just gonna start here because I'm not gonna subject you to the whole chapter. So context, John is her partner. All the books for women say not to smile or nod too much, so when I feel like smiling or nodding, I have to stop and think through the ramifications for my career. So I'm angry, but I think it's denial. One night, John asked what I think about a local ballot referendum, and instead of just telling him, I find myself composing a paragraph free of ambiguity or feelings, words, or rhetoric gaps he could nail me on. And I realize I do it all the time now. Translate myself into Amazon speak, even when I'm the only one listening. And I'm angry and sad and maybe scared, but I think it's just assimilation. Because I know that Amazon is the god to be pleased, and Amazon is men, and thus all men are Amazon. I am angry, but I think it's just my brain, my inferior alien brain. Like, I'm sorry to laugh. It's just one of those things where you can tell that the author thought they were doing something, and it's just all men are Amazon. Like, and I think that there is absolutely room for like some really great feminist analysis in this book, but it lacks a serious level of intersectionality or class consciousness that makes it just feel very like I just it's very two-dimensional, if that makes sense. Like on page 180 in this chapter called Events in the History of Female Employment, there's this passage which you couldn't torture this information out of me. This is crazy embarrassing, and why would you admit this ever? 2011, a Pennsylvania newspaper publishes a horrifying news story about a Lee Valley Amazon warehouse where temperatures soar to more than 100 degrees in summer. So many employees suffer heat exhaustion and heat stroke that Amazon has paramedics on call. Production quotas aren't reduced in extreme heat, and employees too blurry-eyed to see straight have been fired for failing to meet theirs. The people quoted in the story are mostly veteran warehouse workers who know what's par for the course. Amazon was worse than anywhere else they've worked, they say. At other warehouses, the loading dock doors are kept open to provide a cross breeze, but Amazon keeps theirs closed on the assumption that it prevents employee theft. I read this story on the shuttle, and my first thought is, oh yeah, we have warehouses. My second thought is, yes, I can believe all this happened. Amazon has never shut me inside an oven, but I'm familiar with its refusal to adjust productivity requirements in the face of human limitations. In later years, especially after I've left, there will be more reporting, so much more, about delivery drivers peeing in water bottles, but because they don't get bathroom breaks, about high injury rates and workers being fired by an algorithm. Abusive warehouse staff and drivers will become the Amazon story in the public eye. Some corporate employees will take matters into their own hands and start communicating directly with warehouse staff about resistance and revolt. But here in 2011, I think this is indefensible, and then I get off the shuttle and I get sucked back into my own productivity and anxiety vortex, and the warehouses vanish from my mind for another few years. And then the next paragraph is 2012. It's election year, so time for a new round of women. Are they just people or just host bodies? Obviously, that is a real issue, but it's just crazy, like, blasé, very like, I'm only gonna focus on the issues that directly impact me and not any of the issues that impact other people, even in retrospect. And that's what bothers me, because if this was her honestly looking back and being like, yes, I was completely selfish, and, you know, I prioritized my own ability to climb the corporate ladder over the well-being of hundreds and hundreds of warehouse workers and blue-collar workers who are being treated like garbage, I could understand that, and I could see that as really respectable and honest. The issue is that, like, even 8 pages after this warehouse debacle, there's this section that's like weirdly like running the D for Amazon. It's so strange. In this chapter called Amazon Swallows on page 185, so 5 pages after the warehouse incident, she is present day defending Amazon because at one point she worked for the publishing sector of Amazon that published books. She describes going to this publishing event. People in the industry were describing trepidation over Amazon entering the space and how they're worried that that was going to undercut a lot of the pay and money in the publishing industry because Amazon is kind of notorious for doing that. And she says, I certainly get why Amazon's entry into publishing is perceived as a threat. I mean, not only do we have pockets, we also own the world's largest bookstore. If I worked in New York publishing, I'd be antsy too. What bewilders me is the assumption that this is just a setup in a malevolent plan. Their goal is to be the only publisher in the entire world, the blogger says. They want to systematically devalue literature until authors are free of working for free, says the other. They want to control the flow of ideas into the world. From my desk, I can see the whiteboard we're using as a publishing calendar, and the junior staffer who spends a full week a month calculating royalties manually in Excel. There are 15 people in the entire division. Some of us have grad degrees in literature. Some are frustrated writers, or ex-writers, as I now call myself. We're all maniacal readers, and per usual, we're operating on gumption and partial information. It feels very much as if we're putting on a show in a barn, which I find exhilarating and fun. This is why I'm at Amazon, to do crazy things that sound impossible. So the vision of an encroaching, disciplined army doesn't square at all with what I see around me. I don't think Jeff has a grand plan to control which ideas the world has access to. What? Girl, 5 pages ago we were talking about employees peeing in bottles and getting heat stroke, that paramedics had to be on scene because Amazon was more worried about theft in their warehouses. I should clarify that I understand that she wrote this in 2023, and so she's talking about things through that lens. More stuff has come to light since then, and also I think in that passage she was talking about how she felt in the moment, but I do think you just have a responsibility to maybe kind of clarify or expand on that at some point in the book. Even the ending of this book kind of makes it seem like it's this kind of personal journey. I just think that the passage about how Jeff isn't looking to control the narrative, to just be a little bit irresponsible, considering especially what we know now in 2025, where on Kindle they can just take away your e-copy books because you're basically just paying for an extended borrowing of an e-copy book, and it's actually not yours um forever anymore. There's no guarantee of that. So with that knowledge especially, it just looks really bad, and I think if she had any type of actual critical analysis of Amazon other than it was really toxic and I didn't get the promotion that I wanted, which is ultimately what her analysis kind of boils down to, if she looked at it any deeper than that, I think she would have maybe worded things a little bit differently or been more clear about how these are how she kind of justified it at the time, but not necessarily true facts about how Amazon operates or works. I think another good example of this kind of oversight that she has in this book is late on in the book. She's working for the division of Amazon at that point that is doing this store where you can go in and you don't even have to check out. You can just select stuff off the shelf and an AI will determine what you've bought and charge you the right amount to your account. She completely neglected to mention any of the stuff that's more recently come out about how that operated, where the AI was pretty faulty and they had to send a bunch of that footage to workers overseas to like literally categorize what people were buying by hand. Yeah, so this article by The Guardian. So Amazon's AI-powered cashier-free shops use a lot of humans, and here's why that shouldn't surprise you. This is how these bosses get rich, by hiding underpaid, unrecognized human work behind the trappings of technology. In 2021, when Amazon launched its first Just Walk Out grocery store in the UK, this newspaper reported on the cutting-edge technologies that Amazon said made it possible: facial recognition cameras, sensors on shelves, and of course, artificial intelligence. The reality was that people were watching Amazon's customers shop, more than 1,000 of them, as reported by The Information, watching the cameras and labeling footage of shoppers. An employee who worked on the technology said that actual humans, albeit distant and invisible ones based in India, reviewed about 70% of sales that made in the cashierless shops. Now, Amazon is reportedly moving away from Just Walk Out and rolling out smart shopping carts instead. Can't believe she failed to mention any of that in this book. She, like, self-admittedly was, like, one of the top people working on that whole project, so it's, like, crazy she didn't talk about that whatsoever. Which I will say, anecdotally, my mom went to one of the stores and it charged her for, like, all the wrong stuff, and she had to go and get it fixed because the AI just, like, didn't work. Are we surprised? AI is useless. And I failed to mention this as well in my original recording, but everything she talks about on this front page, about the booze, about the beta blockers, about the duct taped like laptops, not like expanded really upon at all in the book. Like the first page makes it out to be like there's going to be all these shocking revelations about how things were operating, and certainly it is a very toxic workplace with a very toxic environment, and she does talk about all those things, but it's like brief aside comments in chapters and chapters where she's basically just bemoaning how she hasn't been promoted yet. You can't present it as an expose if that's not what it is. So many other nitpicky things I could say about this book. Some highlights are the ending scene is this like weird montage where she's like jogging on the street and she's talking to all the people in her life about how her life is going to be out without Amazon. It's like Jeff Bezos materializes and she's telling him stuff. There's also this annoying thing she does where she'll put footnotes in, but it's like completely unnecessary footnotes. Like it's stuff that she could have just put in the main body of the text. It's not sources, it's expanding on what she said, but instead of doing it in a really artful, cool way, like in The Dream House does, which I highly recommend that book, it's more so just annoying and interrupts your kind of flow because you'll be reading a page and then you'll see, oh, there's a footnote. And then you go to the footnote and it's just like her complaining about something that could have just been in the body of the text. And then you have to go back up and like find where you were. It's not anything that adds anything to the text other than just being freaking obnoxious. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. There's so much to say about how much I didn't like this. I think hopefully you will understand my frustration with this book. This is purely about her time at Amazon. I think that if she went in on her addiction, she has described herself as an alcoholic in this book. She has a separate memoir about her alcoholism and how she kind of recovered from that and got sober. I think perhaps her relationship with alcohol is deeply intertwined with her own need to seek her self-worth through climbing like a capitalistic corporate ladder. And not to say that as like a judgment, I'm just saying that as like that could have been an interesting exploration if she was talking about her self-worth in that context. Obviously, I'm making assumptions here. I just think that the decision to make two separate memoirs about two things that I feel could be deeply intertwined or could make this a little bit more interesting, a little less two-dimensional. I would have rather seen that. Nonetheless, I read the whole thing. I gave it 2.5 stars. I am frustrated that I own it now, but I'm gonna put it in some free library somewhere or maybe take it to the bookstore and sell it for credit. The next book I read was We Had to Remove This Post by Hannah Bervutz. And this was my first translated book, actually. It's translated by Emma Ralt, and it was originally in Dutch. I picked this up because I found this on the shelf at the library, and I just recognized it, and I was interested in the topic. I've been interested in content moderation. I'm very passionate about the topic, actually. I have a whole video on my Sims channel where I kind of dive into why I'm passionate about this. A video where I talk about why I'm not going to be playing Inzoi, because I think that the concept of content moderation is just super interesting in general. It's this broad topic of this kind of necessary role in our lives today, right? We live so much of our life on the internet, and somebody has to be behind the scenes making sure that the stuff that is being posted is okay for consumption. I think it's not talked about nearly enough how kind of mentally taxing and damaging these jobs can be. And a lot of these jobs in the United States are outsourced to, workers overseas in a very exploitative way. Like I said, I got into all that in that video, so if you're interested in that discussion, please go watch that. But this book follows a content moderator, Kaylee. She needs this job, so she ends up getting this job doing content moderation for this undisclosed company. She doesn't say what company it is. They're given kind of a list of like rules, and some of it is a bit conflicting, and she describes kind of navigating some of that, where if someone's posting something and there's a certain implication to it, you might not be able to take it down if it wasn't explicitly like said in a particular way. Okay, sorry, I don't have the book because it's at the library, but I found a quote that describes what I was talking about here. The platform doesn't allow people to post things like all Muslims are terrorists because Muslims are a PC, a protected category, just like women, gay people, and believe it or not, Mr. Stiddick, heterosexuals. All terrorists are Muslims, on the other hand, is allowed because terrorists are not a PC, and besides, Muslim isn't an offensive term. And I think I just wanted to read this quote because I did think it's a really relevant discussion to our current day platforms and how they're kind of being run, where you can say certain stuff if you just say it like a certain way, and how it's essentially the same thing, the same racist thing, but there's like this plausible deniability kind of issue or something. I don't know. I kind of laughed when I read that section of the book because it's like a little bit comedic because of just like how completely absurd it is. But then that is just like true to how some of our platforms are running, where you can say certain things that are completely horrific and are promoting awful rhetoric that is completely racist or even straight up just like Nazi propaganda. But then at the same time, if you say the word like kill, you're going to get demonetized and flagged by the algorithm. It's so like, it's just a silly circumstance we find ourselves in. You have to laugh, or else it'll be really genuinely upsetting and sad. I think that this passage is also relevant to the plot and how Kaylee is kind of having to sift through right and wrong and have to adhere to this policy that isn't really sensical. It doesn't make any sense when you really think about it, because it's not actually about the content itself in a way. It's about the exact formatting of the content that is problematic. And so, yeah, that's kind of the circumstances she finds herself under. And the whole point of the book is it's kind of following her and her group of friends as they almost slowly get desensitized and subsequently kind of radicalized to some of these extreme ideas due to what they're kind of just exposed to on the daily with their job. The main character, Kaylee, makes friends. They go out to this bar. There's this scene where they're like in the bar and they're just being super crass and offensive and using words that they previously didn't use, which I forgot to mention. The whole thing is kind of framed as a letter to her lawyer. So you open the book, the first page is this kind of ambiguous letter, and you don't really know what she did wrong or anything, which honestly, I even forgot about that aspect of it. This book, I will say, was not super memorable. Like, thinking back to it, I honestly didn't remember a lot about this book. It was pretty neutral in my brain, and I kind of had to refresh myself a little bit on like what was going on. And overall, I do just find the whole letter to my lawyer, letter to whoever format just like a little bit overdone, a little bit tired. It doesn't really add a lot. And like I said, I forgot about that like completely. And by the end of the book, you forget that that's even really what's going on. I think that this would have been more interesting if it wasn't kind of framed that way. Anyways, main character Kaylee has this girlfriend, and things kind of ensue and go from there, right? I felt like this book was a little bit more of a fizzle out than maybe a good ending. I think the topic is so interesting and there's a lot there, right? Like the way that the people around her are slowly starting to believe some of these conspiracy theories that they're moderating on the internet. Like some of them randomly just start becoming like anti-Semitic, talking about flat earth, like whatever. And I think this is a super relevant topic, especially in kind of the current political, social climate where we find ourselves at, especially in the States, which this was originally Dutch, like I said. So, you know, it's not a one to one. Certainly the dynamics are a little bit different depending on the country that you're in, but certainly with my current, awareness and experience of the world, it's a really interesting topic to kind of see how the contents of the internet kind of makes you desensitized to a lot of these things. And so I didn't dislike this book. I remember reading it pretty quickly. It is a novella, it's pretty short. I think it's like less than 200 pages, if I'm recalling correctly. But I didn't find it to be all that hard hitting. And I don't know if that's because I was expecting there to be some kind of worse ending or something, which I think kind of goes into the whole topic of the book, right? This book is really about this kind of moving goalpost that happens when you're constantly exposed to and like desensitized to horrible things, especially through a screen happening on the internet, and how that seeps into your real life judgment. And I think my reaction to this ending is kind of indicative of this moving goalpost almost, right? Like, I really kind of felt like it was a kind of forgettable ending. I'm trying to be vague about it because I don't want to spoil it, but there's kind of this thing that's meant to be this big reveal, and I didn't really feel very revealed to. I felt very like unsurprised, not very bothered. It's like bad, but it's I expected worse, and that almost goes in exactly with the point of the story, that you're just so desensitized to it at a certain point, you just find yourself at the end being like, "That's it? Like, really?" It didn't feel like some genius thing where that was, like, the intention, but just it coincidentally ended up my reaction to it being kind of in line with the themes of the book, and I thought it was an interesting discussion for this video. Maybe I completely missed, like, the point of this book. Obviously, being a child of the internet, I think you get a different perspective, unfortunately. I don't think it's for the better. I think it's for the worse, but I didn't find this book to super stick out to me as super revolutionary. I didn't sit back and go, "Oh my god." No, in some ways it kind of reminds me of Penance by Eliza Clark, where you're kind of told from the beginning that this is an unreliable narrator sort of thing. It's the similar type of situation with the letter to the lawyer about why she's not joining the lawsuit against the content moderation employer because of her actions being bad or something. And then you get to the place where you find out her actions and it's just kind of like, oh, that's it. Which I really liked Penance. I think I gave Penance the same rating that I gave this though. But yeah, I think I liked Penance more than I liked this book. I don't know, but yeah, for me, it was kind of a fizzle out. It was kind of a weird, non memorable ending. I still gave it 3.5 stars because, like I said, it is pretty neutral in my mind. I think the topic was really interesting. The translation was great. I think that translating Dutch to English is pretty easy anyways. The languages are pretty similar, but I wouldn't have even thought that this was the translated book if you hadn't told me that it was. The next book I got was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and this was translated by Ginny Tapley Tamori, and I will be honest, I don't think I got this. Everyone loves this book. People really talk very highly of this author. It's nice and short. It's 100 and something pages. Let me look. 159 pages. So, yeah, it won awards. People love this. And I bought it because I was like, I'll probably like that. And I didn't have it at my local library. And so I just went ahead and bought it. Turns out I don't get it. I don't like it very much. And I do think it's kind of a me issue just because of how well loved this book is, especially by people whose taste in books I trust like this. And then I don't like it. So that makes me believe that perhaps it just didn't click with me and it's not necessarily an issue with the book. Yeah, it's 150 something pages and I felt like I was slogging through it. This follows Kiko, who has always been kind of considered unusual. She had like this violent streak as a kid where she like hit a kid over the head with like a shovel in order to get him to stop doing something, just because she simply didn't understand that that wasn't like something that you do. She's just described as kind of awkward, a little weird, kind of autistic, honestly, where she's just not understanding social cues or society. But then, like I said, she has like this kind of violent streak too. And basically, she just really loves her job at this convenience store because she likes customer service, because there's basically just like a rule book you follow and you know exactly what social interaction you have throughout the day is meant to be like. You know what the rule book and the playbook is for your life. It just makes sense to her because it's very orderly. You're expected to act a certain way, and she likes it. And she's a little bit older. I believe she's like in her 30s in this book. And there's, like I said, a lot of societal expectations. Her sister is kind of bothering her about, when are you gonna meet somebody? When are you gonna get a different job? When are you gonna, you know, do something else with your life? And she doesn't really want to. She kind of just wants to work her convenience store job. Anyway, she meets this incel because he starts working at her place of employment, and they decide to pretend to be in a relationship so that they both can appear normal. The incel monologues in this are insufferable, and I understand that it's because he's insufferable as a character. Like, I totally get that. But it just went on and on and on. I don't know. And sometimes I take issue with people who will be like, I didn't like this about this book. And then I'm sitting there going, well, that's kind of the point of the book. I don't think you got the book. I will be the first to admit I don't think I got this because yeah, it would be paragraphs and paragraphs of his incel monologue and I couldn't do it. I get that he's meant to be insufferable. I didn't want him to be a likable character. I think that the commentary happening in here is super interesting, but the execution of it and having to read like paragraphs on paragraphs of just him just being awful and demeaning, it just got so tired so quickly, and I just didn't really get what it was doing. Like, it kind of just felt like it did this whole thing and then it was kind of for no reason. And I was just like, I don't really understand what the point was. Which I don't know if I mentioned this, but part of the reason I wanted to pick this up is because I've had kind of like a work theme going on. I read Exit Interview, I read Several People Are Typing, I read We Had to Take Down This Post. So I was looking for kind of more books within that theme of like kind of toxic or like weird workplace situations. And I wanted to pick up The Jungle, which I would still love to read, but I just feel like I really can. I have ARFID, and if you don't know what that is, like people often describe it as like a picky eating disorder, but I don't think that's a really complete or fair way to present what ARFID is. But essentially, I have a lot of trouble with eating certain foods. I can be very easily grossed out by food, and The Jungle is about like a meat processing plant, and apparently a lot of people like want to go vegetarian after eating it, and I don't think that's a good idea for me, but I'm sad because I really want to read it. But in the same kind of vein, people were recommending The Jungle, they were also recommending this. So I picked this up. People kind of talk about it as like a classic along the lines of that book, and I can't read that book. Maybe that's part of the reason why I didn't like this is I was wanting something more like that, like more of a like kind of workers' rights situation than necessarily like a social dynamic situation. I also think obviously like this is translated and originally Japanese, and so there's a certain level of me not understanding some of the cultural context perhaps. That was this book. I gave it 2 stars. Sorry. I also will be looking to rehome this. The next book I read was The Big Swiss by Jen Began. I found this at a local bookstore, which I obviously recognized it. I hear everyone talk about this book, but I honestly did not know what it was about. And it wasn't until I picked it off the shelf and read the back of it that I was like, oh, I actually really want to read this. So then I bought it, and this is so hyped, right? Like I see people talk about this book all the time, even though somehow I managed to dodge what the book was actually about. This book is following the main character, Greta. She is a sex therapist transcriptionist. So she works for this guy. I believe his name is like yeah, OM is his name. And he kind of is recording these sex therapy sessions that he's having with his clients because he's writing a book, and she is who he hired to do that. And she is doesn't give a damn about ethics or anything. She's a horrible person, but she's so fun to read, which I love reading horrible people who are fun to read. And she basically ends up thinking that she's fallen in love with this character who she calls Big Swiss. Then she ends up meeting this woman by recognizing her voice at a dog park where she's walking her beloved dog, Pinon. And like I said, this is an insufferable main character. Greta is not a good person. She even early on, like she's living with her friend Sabine in this town that she's pretty new to. And it's this like old house. Her friend Sabine is just like kind of rarely ever really there. She just kind of floats off for months at a time. Greta's kind of alone. But one of the instances is Sabine has like her son or her godson come over, and Greta is like thirsting over this kid, and he's like, I don't even remember if he's 18. I think he must be. He's like 20, like early 20s. She's older. Greta is older. All the characters in this book are older. So yeah, she's just like kind of gross, insufferable. She is the type of person who uses a lot of her past traumas to kind of take the blame off herself and, justify why she's the way she is. And she's essentially blameless in her life and incapable of kind of recognizing that her actions are maybe her actions. This is compulsively readable. There's a lot of on-page sex in this book, and because I said it was compulsively readable, my coworkers definitely think that I'm like reading smut at work because I was reading this and people were looking over my shoulder, and yeah. But it's not like sexy on page sex, if that makes any sense. Like it's honestly kind of gross, which I think it mainly came across as gross just because the Greta's like background is that she's spying on this girl and that they met kind of disingenuously, and the reason that this girl feels connected to Greta is because Greta is using private information to kind of get to know her better and to feel like they're like clicking when they're like not. I know that sometimes people will have this thing where they think that lesbian on paper sex is just so raunchy. I don't think that that's why it came across as gross to me. I think it truly came across as gross because of Greta's motivations and just everything you know about her as a character and the information that she's using against Big Swiss. Also, another thing that I kind of forgot to mention, which is pretty relevant to this whole thing, is Big Swiss is 29 years old, Greta is in her 40s, so there's a little bit of an age gap there. And part of the whole thing and the whole reason that Greta is kind of enamored with her is Big Swiss is a gynecologist who's never had an orgasm. Yeah, that's further context on why the relationship dynamic is just not the greatest. I think that it added a lot to the book though. Like, my pet peeve is when authors don't commit to the bit. Like, there are so many instances where I want the author to commit just like a little bit more to like the weirdness or the grossness or whatever. And I think that I really liked how this handled it. I know this is like the intro book recommended to people who like weird fiction, along with Bunny, which I did buy and I have on my shelf because this has inspired me to go ahead and get Bunny because I really liked this. So hopefully I'll really like the other kind of popular weird book pick. And people certainly have kind of mixed opinions on if this is truly living up to the hype or not. I personally really liked it. I will say that people in my real life and online are really grossed out by the kind of premise of this, which I completely get. It's like a gross premise. She's like stalking this girl basically and like trying to manipulate her into liking her because of the HIPAA violations she is engaging in. Like I said, I just love reading like a horrible main character who's still somehow readable. I think there's a way to do a main character where you're still secretly kind of rooting for them, and that's like the best kind of horrible person to read. Like that kind of just dilemma that you have when you're really rooting for someone who's like awful. Like I love that in a book. But yeah, this book really reaffirmed for me that this is like the type of book that I should be reading. And like I said, I picked up Bunny and I've kind of picked up some other quote weirder picks, and I adored this. I thought this was great. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Also, this book is just like a lovely feeling and the cover is gorgeous. I love this cover. I love the way it's like a floppy book. I don't know, I love that. The print in here on this book is also just gorgeous, and kind of the density of the text is really pleasing to my eye. And now I want to read some of Jen Beacon's other novels. It says on the back that she has her debut novel, Pretend I'm Dead, and then also Vacuum in the Dark. I don't know, I want to read some of her other stuff because like I said, I really enjoyed this, and I think that I could potentially like some of her other work. I am trying to find favorite author still. Someone who's written like 15 things and I love all of them. That's the goal. The next book I picked up was BLOB, a love story by Maggie Sue. And this book I found because I watch a lot of like anticipated new release videos on YouTube, and this I had kind of seen described. I was like, oh, I'm interested in that. That sounds weird and crazy. It was kind of pitched to me as this girl who finds this blob in an alleyway and then she like falls in love with it or something. And so it was kind of on my radar, and then one day I just walked into my local library, went to the new releases shelf, and there it was, and so I was like, I want to read this. I had jury duty the next day, so I took this book to jury duty and I proceeded to read the whole thing in like 2 days. I read like 150 pages of this just like at jury duty, and this is indeed about a woman who finds a gelatinous blob and decides to, you know, make it into her boyfriend. She's out at this party she's freshly broken up with, if I recall correctly, at the start of this book, and she's feeling really depressed and kind of down on herself. She's kind of couch rotting all day, not really doing much with her life. She goes out with this coworker of hers. She works as a hotel receptionist, and this coworker takes her to this show of kind of like their mutual friend or something, and outside, there's this gelatinous blob with like beady eyes, and she thinks it's like a sea creature or something, and she decides to scoop it up, take it home, and rescue it. And then, as she spends time with this blob, he starts to kind of become sentient, move around, grow limbs, and then she try and morph this blob into her boyfriend. Like, she puts on like a movie about, like, human anatomy and biology and, like, has the Blob, like, watch it so he can learn how to grow more limbs to become, like, a human being, and it is all with the intention of, like, her trying to get with this Blob who's now a man. A great premise, can I just say? I love that. Also, her friend who's a receptionist, she doesn't really like that girl very much. Like, this is a main character once again who's like a little bit insufferable. She's kind of a bad person. She's thinking kind of negatively about everyone around her, not being really receptive to people's attempts to reach out to her. She is also, like I said, depressed. Like, she spends a lot of time with Blob, like sitting, eating Doritos on the couch, kind of stereotype, like the house is like destroyed. And yeah, I don't want to get too much into like stuff that happens after that because it definitely takes different turns. Think I really like this book. Like I obviously was kind of glad that this is the one that I brought to jury duty because I was super interested in reading it. I got home and then I just laid in bed and like read the rest of it. Like I loved this book. However, I wish it was a little bit weirder than it is, which I know it's like a weird premise, but there was this scene where Blob has grown not all of his limbs yet. I think he doesn't have legs, but he has like all his other parts. And he's figured out how to operate the TV. And she walks in on the Blob, like purchasing porn on her TV, and like him like jacking off to it, and it like feels like it's about to go down this really crazy rabbit hole, and sorry for the spoilers, but it kind of retreats from that and doesn't really touch on that again. And I almost wish it just went a little bit further because that whole plot point felt kind of like this solo island in the rest of it. Like it's never really addressed again or discussed, but it was just such a weird, like awkward, gross scene where it just is super off-putting and like, ugh, but it was like so, I don't know. I think if the book was more of that, I would have really loved this. Like, I loved this already. I talk about this book with like everybody where they're like, what kind of books do you read? And I'll bring up several people are typing, or I'll talk about this book where this woman made a blob into her boyfriend. I think it's so fun. But yeah, I just wanted it to commit to the bit just like a little bit further. I think that could have been really good. I wasn't super stoked about the ending of this either. It felt a little bit like it retreated from what it was doing and it just kind of didn't really know what to do at the end almost, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. And yeah, I almost wish it went in like a weirder direction, like I said, which maybe it's just my personal taste, but regardless of that, I just, yeah, felt like the ending kind of, it read like someone was trying to come up with how does this resolve, how does this end, and that's what you get, and it's one of those where it's just like, what was the point of this really? I gave this a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I think I might even bump this up to a 4, honestly. I just remember this book so fondly. I read it so quickly. It was compulsively readable. It was crazy. Like I liked the weirdness of it. I wish it committed a little bit harder to the bit. I wish it had a different ending, but that would have like made it for me. I don't know. It was just such a cool book where you're just exploring this blob as he gains sentience and then autonomy and is making his own decisions, and yeah, it's a crazy read. I loved it. The last book I finished at the end of June. This is kind of like an unfaithful summer wrap up because I haven't read anything in like 2 months. At least I haven't finished a book in 2 months. I have a stack of 3 books here that I have started and then either DNF'd or not finished. I've gotten close to finishing one of them. We'll get there when we get there. First, I'm going to talk about You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. I got this as an ARC, which I was super excited about. I basically just emailed and was like, hey, my viewers recommend your books to me all the time. I would love to review it. They sent it to me, and then I read like all of it in just a couple of days. This book is a queer horror book following a mute autistic trans guy as he's a part of like this bug worm cult. And more than even that, it's just kind of exploring abusive relationships, to be honest. And the main character, Crane, has kind of entered this cult and has kind of stayed in it and justified it as the cult is what gave him the ability to transition and gave him his ability to be his self. This book is really dark, and I think its opening scene even is a good representation of kind of what the book is going to explore. Crane deals with some really unfortunate circumstances. He is, at the receiving end of an abusive relationship. And the whole premise is that he ends up pregnant, and it's like this body horror where he is viscerally terrified of pregnancy, of birth, of having a kid, and he ends up in that situation. It feels like this book was designed for me. Like, that is also my visceral fear. I related so much to Crane as well as a trans neurodivergent person. And you could tell that this book was really written from a place of experience. It was a lot about mental health throughout this book. Crane is suffering immensely of depression and other kind of mental illness issues, self-harm, that kind of thing. And I think at times, some of the stuff in this book was a little bit grating because sometimes I struggle with characters whose issues are kind of too similar to mine, if that makes any sense. Like, it's certainly realistic, it's certainly how I would exactly react in a situation like this, and yet it really bothers me for some reason, and it's just a personal thing that I have where I love reading horrible characters, but they have to be a different kind of mentally ill than me. Which, by the way, I don't mean to imply that Crane is like a horrible character. That's not what I meant by that. I just mean that when a character has like anxiety and like depression and like kind of the same things that I kind of struggle with, I have a harder time reading it. I don't know exactly why. I think partially it's just like less fun for me because it's like very visceral. I've like been there. I think also partially I think I can have some of the same negative self-talk I do to myself to the character, which makes it a little bit less enjoyable, where I'm just like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, get over it. Where if it was a real human going through that, I would be like very sympathetic and not have that opinion at all. But because I'm like reading this monologue, it's a little bit like, just get over it, which is very much how I talk to myself about some of this stuff. Sorry, I didn't mean for this to be like a therapy session. I'm just trying to like explain why I didn't love certain parts of the narration in this. There's also a lot of discussions of like transness as like this idea of like pre-transition Crane being this kind of separate entity, this separate person. I personally just don't relate to that in my experience of transness, so that stuff to me feels a little bit like a trope. Obviously, Andrew Joseph White is a trans man, and he obviously wrote this from his own experience, so I'm not saying that that's not like a good or real trans experience. I'm just saying it wasn't relatable to me. Nonetheless, I really liked this book. Like, I'm saying all these kind of nitpicky things about it. I really liked it. I read it in a couple days, like I said. I was reading it at work. I had one night where I came home, I sat on the couch, and I read until like 3 a.m., just finishing this book. It was an arc, so I am perhaps a little bit biased. I was very excited to be able to read this ahead of time, and I'm very excited to read more of Andrew Joseph White's books in general, especially adult books. I would love some more adult books by him. I think we're severely lacking in the trans men sphere when it comes to adult fiction. There's a couple books out there about trans women, less so about trans men, and specifically for it to be kind of this like body horror thing. It's just so fun. I love how gross it was. I love that there was stuff happening on screen. I like that Andrew Joseph White didn't shy away from discussing some of these topics. I think, especially having come from a YA background, it perhaps could have been a little bit intimidating or scary to kind of step into this zone and like really like page one, just like put it all out there. I think that it's a masterful choice for what this book is and what it's trying to be. And like I said, more than it being about the cult, it's about this, abusive relationship. And it's unfortunate, but I do think it's kind of an under-discussed thing in the queer community where queer people perhaps tolerate more, especially trans people dating cis people. We can tolerate some pretty horrific stuff because of the way that we're told horrible things about our own worth or ability to shape up to be, real men or real women. Yeah, I think that this book was very relatable to me and very cool that there is a person who's writing about these experiences. I'm normally not the type to give trigger warnings for books. I think that you have the capability of researching yourself and deciding if something is right for you, and I'm not gonna dictate that for you in my YouTube video. I do wanna say about this book, just because I know that this is a really intense book in certain ways, that you might just look into it for this one before you pick it up, and I believe this book is out on September 9th, so if you wanna check it out, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I read this all the way back in June, and then I didn't, like, read another good book for a while after this, so I give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I loved this. That's the conclusion of books that I've actually finished. Then I went on an unfortunate series of events. It wouldn't be like a wrap up for me if I didn't describe just bumping into issues with reading. I'm still getting into a place where I can consistently read. After reading You Weren't Meant to Be Human, it was one of those books where it just, I don't know, and this is how you know it's a good book. It just left like this hole that I couldn't fill with anything else that I was kind of picking up. Not usually a bad book that does that. Usually it's like the book is so good that you're just looking for something that's like that. And my issue was I couldn't find anything that was like that. The first thing I tried to pick up was Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin. This book follows like trans women in an apocalypse where they're harvesting men's testicles from them. I liked the concept in theory. In actuality, I found the first couple chapters to just be really purple, really kind of overwritten. It just the narrative style, I just didn't want to deal with it. So before I got too invested in the book, I ended up putting it down. The next book I picked up was this book, which I own. I bought this a while ago. It just looked interesting on the shelf at my local library. And then I saw, I think Frankie read it. Someone read it. And I was like, oh, maybe I should pick that up. So then I picked it up. It is a book about motherhood. It's about a woman who she's an artist who has kind of walked away from her job in order to be a stay-at-home mom. Her husband works this job where he's kind of away all the time, kind of all the time. In the book, she talks about how like he was gone more weeks than he's there. In the book, he's never there. Like, there's never like a week where he's there. It's like always like 2 days and then he's gone again. And she's being kind of driven to madness by this experience, and she turns into a dog. A premise that sounds really interesting, right? Like explores motherhood, explores sexism, explores expectations of women. The main character is an artist. I'm an artist. That could be relatable to me. She definitely talks about some art field related stuff that I felt really relatable. In the end, I ended up getting most of the way through this. I'm on page 159 out of 238. So I really should just buckle down and finish this because I'm really almost all the way done with it. But I put this down because it was so boring. I just was so bored. Like this woman kept having like dog impulses and then it felt like there was no real repercussions. She was kind of just rehashing the same cycle over and over and over again where she would do something kind of verge on like a line, right? And then she would just be able to kind of explain it away. Like, oh, she's just such a good boy mom. Oh, like, I just blah blah blah. And she just explain it to her husband or whoever she's with, and nothing was really happening. There's a little bit more at play here that I guess I could describe. There's a pack of women who are maybe also dogs in the story, and she goes to the library and she finds this book about spiritual women, and she also falls in love with this book and is writing the author throughout this book and is like, your book is so important to me. And she's talking to this woman. She starts feeding her son like raw meat. They're running around, they're playing. She gets like a crate and she's like putting her son in the crate. Like, it's crazy, right? And yeah, I still felt like it was just so boring. It's a very attached kind of writing style. You're very removed from the people involved. You're told about her feelings, but it's very impersonal. None of the characters in this book ever have names that you learn. You never learn the mother's name. She's just referred to as the mother, or even the son, I think, is just referred to as the son. Same with the husband. Some of the other characters have names, but yeah, she doesn't necessarily. And it's very much that vibe of just like very impersonal, very removed and boring. Like I said, I'm almost at the end of it. I have that much more to read. I've already tanked through most of this, so I think I should just power through and just finish it. I couldn't do it. And I was like, well, maybe I'll swap to something better and different. And then the other things I picked up haven't been good either. So I should just return to this and just tough it out. At the current place where I'm at with it being as boring as it is, I think I would give it 2.75 out of 5 stars. I think it's an interesting concept. I think I enjoyed it more than some other books, but some of the other books I read, like Exit Interview, I that was like a 400-page book nearly, and I was able to read the entirety of that, whereas this is like a much better analysis of gender dynamics, and yeah, I'm less able to get through this. I don't know. It just something about it, unfortunately. And I think this is also like a motion picture now. Yeah, it says now a motion picture. I kind of want to watch the movie to see what that's like because the book is, yeah, diabolical. It's boring as hell. That is Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. I don't even think I said that it was by Rachel Yoder. Sorry. Rachel Yoder wrote this. Then I got this book. This is a library book. I'm not gonna hold this up for long because I have to cover the stickers of my library on it, but it's Fake Accounts by Lauren Oyer. I'm about 59 pages into this book, so I still have a ways to go with this as well. This book supposedly follows a girl who finds out that her boyfriend is running a alt-right conspiracy theorist like account online, and it's like a pretty popular one. And it's on the eve of Donald Trump's first inauguration, and it's just not what she thought like he was. Even throughout the book, she's pretty insistent that he doesn't actually believe these things, that he's just posting them on the internet for like attention or like popularity, like just cuz. And honestly, that's what the book says it's going to be about. That's not really what this book is about at all. I'm only 59 pages in and we've barely talked about that at all. She's talked about meeting this guy in Berlin, which yes is relevant. I think that is relevant backstory, but I think this isn't really what I wanted it to be. Like, even the inside cover is like, oh, takes place on the eve before Donald Trump's inauguration. But that's not true. It's like several weeks before. I feel like you shouldn't be able to lie about what's in the context of your book on the like back cover or like sleeve of the book. Like, I want what the book promised it would be. I got clickbaited by this book. I don't know. I'm only 59 pages in. I've been spoiled though, some events that happen a little bit later. And yeah, the book is not what it presents itself to be based on the events that I know happen later in this book. So I don't know. I want to continue to read it. I kind of liked the writing style at first when I first picked it up. I liked the first couple chapters. As time went on, it got a little bit more grating. It's a little bit more difficult to read. It's kind of needlessly wordy in places. There will be just like a very conversational tone to it that normally I really enjoy, but instead just made it kind of hard to understand because they're reading it on paper. There's not the kind of punctuation needed in order to understand the kind of flow of the sentence. And this happened a couple of times with me, and I've been out of the flow of reading, so maybe this is a me issue and not actual book itself. But yeah, just a bit difficult to read at times. I love the premise though. Like I think that's so interesting, and that's some of the most frustrating books for me is when I like the idea of it and just not the execution. And I think that that's where this book is headed. Like I said, I'm only like 60-ish pages into this. I might continue reading. I might give up on it. Like I said, I kind of feel like I know where it's going based on the spoiler that was given to me by accident, and I don't know. I can't believe that that's the turn this book takes, and I can't believe that that could be in any way relevant to what I feel like I picked this book up for. The last book I kind of picked up, I don't have with me. I don't know where I put it. I went to the beach. I was shopping at a bookstore there, and I picked up this book, How Can I Help You, which is about a woman who works in a library. She's like an ex-nurse. She used to work in like a senior center, and it's like a thriller. She has this streak of killing people prematurely before it is actually their time. She's a little bit evil, and it's kind of about her past kind of catching up to her. There's this woman who gets hired at her library after she's been working there for about a year, and you can tell it's kind of going somewhere. I don't feel behooved to find out really where it's going at the moment. I think it's me at this point. Maybe I need to self-select a little bit better. I'm thinking about trying to pick up Bunny or, maybe one of my other library books. I have a whole stack of them over there because I checked a ton of them out from the library thinking that I was reading a bunch, and turns out not so much. Yeah, the last 2 months have been kind of tough for me. However, I think that I've read a lot of really cool things this summer, and overall, I'm really excited that I feel like I really have a better grasp on my taste in books and what I might be interested in. So, yeah, that's everything that I read this last summer. And as always, thank you for watching.